Story 1. I have been a mechanic for nearly 15 years. I am the lead tech in my shop, and my company just sold recently to a different corporation, and with that came a new boss. A little bit of history about new boss. He is 22 and the son of one of my older bosses, so everybody suspects a bit of nepotism at play. The older boss was ruthless and a jerk, and really put a dent in my confidence about being a mechanic, so I may hold somewhat of a grudge against the family. But I try to do my best to move on and just do my job. The new boss and I have had some minor issues already in the 3 months he has been here. But I'm the type of person who can generally put my feelings to the side if the money keeps ending up on my paycheck. Today, however, that changed. I will admit I am not the most organized person. I have ADHD and at 33 years old, am still learning to function without the medicine that I weaned off of at 26. My toolbox is normally cluttered, but I keep all my tools in my area or on top of my box. It's the system that works for me. This morning I clocked in and was about to unlock my box when the new boss came up to me and said, "You will not be working on cars today until your box is organized." I said, "My box is organized in the way that it works for me." He shot back with, "Not good enough for me or the company. I need to be able to find tools when I need them, and it needs to look neat and orderly for when corporate comes through." I paused for a second and said, "So you are telling me that you need to be able to find my tools that I have purchased when you need to use them?" I don't remember signing that agreement. He nodded and muttered something about insubordination and that he would be passing off all the work to the other technician until it was completed to his satisfaction. I had assumed he was bluffing until 3 cars came in, and all 3 tickets were handed to the other tech. I don't have any problem being told to clean up, and I would have even done it his way. But I had a problem with his tone, and this was messing with my paycheck. So while he was in the back doing tire inventory, I opened the top drawer of my toolbox, spread my arms, and swept every single thing into the drawer that I could. I repeated for the second and third drawer until the top was clean. I used the same process for both of my smaller carts until each one could be closed and locked. Then I clocked out for lunch. I am currently sitting in my car in the parking lot eating lunch and browsing job listings while watching him try to open all of my drawers to use my tools, because 3 more cars came in and the other tech can't handle 6 at a time. Update. I did not expect this to blow up like this lol. I clocked back in from lunch and boss asked to speak with me. Apparently he called the district manager and also his dad, who is a district manager of another district, for advice, and it sounds like they both told him to make it right, and that he could not afford to lose me. I know how it sounds, but it's true. He told me that he just wanted to make a good impression on corporate, who would be coming through in a few weeks, and that he shouldn't have targeted me personally. He paid me for the 3 vehicles he worked on, and I let him know that I was willing to work with him, but if he ever spoke down to me again, there would not be a do-over. I would leave. He also inquired about buying his own tools. He's not a bad dude, just a little anxious, I guess. I suppose I will stick around for a little, as the paychecks are worth it, and the drive is convenient, and I have a wife and a house to pay for. As for some of the responses, yes, I am somewhat of a slob with my toolbox, but I also average 10-15 cars a day, so I don't always have time or the drive to neatly organize my tools daily. He said he will be bringing his toolbox from home and calling or texting to ask to borrow before borrowing. I guess I am somewhat of a rare mechanic, as I don't mind people borrowing my tools as long as they are put back. Also, the empty toolbox comments. I own all 4 of my toolboxes, so they would be coming with me if I left. Thanks for the support, guys. Seems like maliciously complying paid off for once. Story 2. I've always been a hard worker. Ever since I started my first job at 16, I've believed in giving my all and being a team player. That's why, when I landed this office job 2 years ago, I was excited to be part of a new team. Little did I know, I'd soon be dealing with the most entitled coworker I've ever met. Our office has this unwritten rule where we ask if anyone wants anything when we go to the shops. It's a nice gesture, keeps the team spirit up, you know? Everyone chips in for their own stuff, of course. But there's this one guy, let's just call him the boss's brother, who takes advantage of everything and everyone. From day one, he rubbed me the wrong way. He'd strut around like he owned the place, delegating his work to others, especially the newbies. He'd make us call customers, search for information he should have known, and basically do his job while he browsed the internet all day. Half the time, he wasn't even in the office, off doing who knows what. And when he did pick up a phone call, he wouldn't even bother to make notes, so we'd end up calling the customer again. Talk about inefficient. The worst part? His brother's the boss, so he acts like he's our manager or something. It's infuriating. Now, about the food thing. Whenever I'd bring something to eat, he'd be there, hovering over my desk. Boss's brother, where's mine? Me, I didn't go to the shops. This is from home. Boss's brother, you should have made extra. And don't even get me started on when we actually buy him lunch. He's the pickiest eater I've ever met. Boss's brother, can you make sure they add extra cheese? Oh, and no tomatoes. And can they put the sauce on the side? Actually, can they mix the chicken and beef together? It's like ordering for a toddler, I swear. The kicker, when he goes out to get food for himself, he never asks if anyone else wants anything. Not once. So, after months of this behavior, I'd had enough. The next time we had a fish and chip run, I saw my chance for a little payback. Boss's brother, I'll have a mini fish and chips. Me, sure thing. I headed to the chippy, a plan forming in my mind. As I looked at the pre-cooked fish, my eyes landed on the smallest, driest piece available. It was perfect. Server, are you sure you want that one? Me, oh yes, that's exactly the one I want. When I got back to the office, I distributed everyone's food, saving the boss's brother for last. The look on his face when he opened his container was priceless. Boss's brother, what the hell is this? You call this a fish? Me, that's all they had left. Sorry about that. I sat down at my desk, enjoying my own perfectly cooked fish, trying hard not to smirk. For once, the boss's brother was quiet, poking at his sad little fish with a plastic fork. But it didn't end there. Word got around the office about the fish incident, and suddenly, people started standing up to him more. When he'd try to pass off his work, they'd refuse. When he'd ask for ridiculously specific lunch orders, they'd forget half the instructions. It was like a dam had broken, and all the pent-up frustration with his entitled behavior came flooding out. The boss even caught wind of what was happening. I overheard him talking to his brother one day. Boss, you can't keep acting like this. You're part of a team, not the king of the office. Shape up, or we'll have to discuss your position here. From that day on, the boss's brother's attitude changed. He started doing his own work, making his own calls, and miraculously even offered to pick up lunch for everyone one day. And you know what? He didn't even complain when they forgot to put the sauce on the side. As for me, I still bring my lunch from home most days. But now, when I do join in on a food run, I make sure everyone gets exactly what they ordered. Even the boss's brother. After all, I'm a team player. Always have been, always will be. Story 3. Hi everyone. This happened over the end of the summer in my hometown, a little city in central Mexico. First of all, 2 nights before this happened, my city got hit by really strong winds. We hadn't seen anything like it before. The wind tore up some trees, billboards, fences, and in my house it tore up a plastic dome we had in the middle of our roof. It was a hard night because we had a literal hole in the middle of the house, and it was raining. We had to cover it up with a giant tent, while also throwing out buckets of water off the lower floor and making sure nothing important got wet. After having spent the next day repairing and cleaning everything, my parents decided to relax for the weekend by going to eat at one of our favorite places. So we were in this restaurant, and it was clear that it also got hit hard by the winds. The restaurant is basically a giant terrace, so it's pretty much outdoors inside the city. Upon entering, I noticed the owner on the floor next to the bar, fixing some stuff. He was wearing working clothes and was full of grease and stuff, so if you didn't know him already, You would think he was a worker in the restaurant. He's pretty chill and kind, always greets regulars and goes from table to table asking if everything is okay. The place is like casual fancy and one of the best in the city. This is when the entitled man shows up. While we were eating, there was a blackout because workers of the electrical company were fixing a damaged power line nearby. So the TVs and the music went off. And this Kevin started whistling and screaming for the restaurant staff to do something. Then the owner approached him and said that they would fire up their backup generator, and that please he needs to be quiet in the meantime because this was no place to be causing a scene. Kevin went ballistic because he thought a worker was shushing him, so you know the usual. He hit the owner with the classic, "Do you know who I am?" He was yelling and telling him that he knew the owner, and that he was going to get him fired and the like, that he wanted to speak to the manager because he was paying a lot for such a bad service. Obviously, him knowing the owner was a blatant lie because he was in front of him, just with working clothes, and Kevin was probably trying to show off because in his table, there was another man and two visibly embarrassed women. The whole restaurant went quiet because most of the customers are regulars. My city is a popular vacation spot, so this is like a hidden restaurant that only locals know. I always saw the owner as a gentle giant because he's so huge and pretty cool, but he got as red as a tomato and started yelling at the guy. I've never seen him like that. I'm roughly translating what the owner said. His choice of words were, "Interesting. Spanish is such a beautiful language to curse at someone in." He told Kevin that the place was his restaurant and Kevin was not welcome anymore, that he please picked up his companions and got the heck out of there. The owner told him that he didn't care one bit who he was, and that he didn't want his money, he just wanted him gone. Kevin was curled up in his seat being yelled at by the huge man. He stood up after that and quickly went to the exit, while yelling "screw you" when he was at a safe distance. When it was all over, the owner apologized to everyone in the restaurant and offered some free drinks and snacks. Like I said, he's a pretty cool guy. By the way, we were without electricity for like 5 minutes, so nothing that needed that whole drama. Story 4. Growing up, I faced significant challenges with math, struggling to comprehend the subject. Unfortunately, this led to hurtful experiences, as tutors and classmates would often belittle me, using derogatory terms and isolating me during math class. These memories continue to have a negative impact on me, instantly transporting me back to those difficult years. It wasn't until I turned 24 that I received a diagnosis of dyscalculia, also known as math dyslexia. Now, at the age of 27, I reflect on a recent incident that sheds light on the power of standing up against injustice. In December, a particular customer, let's call her Karen, crossed a line with her disrespectful behavior. To provide some context, Karen had been a regular at the store for a long time, even before I started working there 3 years ago. However, it was approximately 2 years ago that she began treating me with disdain. Karen had always been a bit grumpy and rude, but nothing out of the ordinary. Unfortunately, a false accusation aggravated our relationship further. A rumor circulated that I had stolen money from our elderly neighbor, Mary, who was an old family friend. In truth, Mary had kindly lent me a small sum to help pay off some debts, which I had repaid by the time these accusations emerged. However, Karen, a person who passes judgment without considering all the facts, quickly transformed her dislike for me into an intense hatred. One day, after the rumor spread, Karen's agitation reached a peak. Even when I asked her if she wanted a receipt, she responded with eye-rolling and a snide remark. "Of course, I'm a regular here, and you know I always want my receipt when it comes to the likes of you." Though I understood her preference, it was store policy to ask every customer. This incident was just one example of her ill treatment. She even berated me for showing kindness to a child in the store's pick and mix section and reported me to the boss for not taking it seriously enough. However, I did take the situation seriously, addressing the issue with the child's mother, educating him about appropriate behavior, and promptly cleaning and sanitizing the area. Karen's behavior continued to escalate. She completely ignored my greetings whenever I encountered her at the store, purposely avoiding my presence. Strangely, I found it somewhat amusing that my mere existence could trigger such a strong negative reaction in someone without any legitimate reason. However, everything changed one fateful December day. December was an exceptionally busy month for our small grocery store, being one of only two in our town. On this particular day, the store was bustling with customers, and I had already been working for a few hours when Karen approached my checkout counter. As I scanned her groceries, I concluded the transaction and asked, "Would you like the receipt, ma'am?" To my astonishment, Karen looked me dead in the eye and asked, "I have a question for you." Caught off guard, I replied, "Yes, ma'am." "Are you just dense, or are you completely R-word?" I stood there, utterly stunned by her hurtful words. However, before I could react, an unexpected advocate came to my defense, a sweet old lady who happened to witness the exchange. She gasped in disbelief and confronted Karen. "What kind of language is that? How dare you?" Assertively, she continued, "I am a regular at this store as well. She should remember who I am and my needs." Firmly, the old lady responded, "It doesn't matter if you are a regular. It's her job to ask. It's not her job to be spoken to like that." Karen, now facing the consequences of her actions, struggled to justify her behavior. "I don't trust her. She stole money from Mary," she exclaimed. The sweet old lady, aware of the truth, snapped back, "I knew Mary, and I know her. Mary was like a third grandmother to her. She wouldn't dream of doing something like that to her. Shame on you." Overwhelmed by the emotional weight of the situation, I excused myself and retreated to the break room, seeking solace. Moments later, my manager entered the break room and offered a sympathetic ear. I shared my side of the story, shedding light on Karen's consistent mistreatment toward me. Understanding the gravity of the situation, she was the one who had recommended I get tested for dyscalculia. My manager advised me to take the day off, encouraging me to seek comfort from my therapist. She assured me that she would find someone to cover my shift, emphasizing that I needn't worry about Karen. As it turned out, that day happened to be my last shift of the year. Days later, when I returned to work, I discovered that Karen had been banned from the store. The sweet old lady, along with several other witnesses who had stood in line during the incident, testified to my manager about Karen's outburst. Their accounts, filled with outrage, provided compelling evidence that allowed my manager to escalate the matter to higher authorities, resulting in Karen's indefinite ban. Word of the incident reached the other grocery store up the street, prompting them to follow suit and ban her as well. Apparently, I wasn't the only store clerk whom she had terrorized. Now, Karen must drive over an hour to access a grocery store. It seems justice has been served. In conclusion, this incident serves as a reminder of the importance of speaking up against mistreatment and standing together against injustice. Though I endured years of struggle and hurtful experiences, the support of kind-hearted individuals like the sweet old lady and my understanding manager has helped me regain confidence and find solace. With their support, I am determined to overcome the challenges presented by dyscalculia and continue to grow, both personally and professionally. Story 5. Hello all. A couple of years ago, I posted about having this troublesome neighbor in the malicious compliance community. That problematic neighbor is actually two ladies' mother and daughter, whom we will call Norma and Scarlett, respectively. For context, I live in a very religious area and have always followed the belief that bonding with neighbors helps make the community safer. From my perspective, Norma and Scarlett have always been two mentally ill ladies who needed my respect and understanding, so I tried to ignore their outbursts. One beautiful evening, I was home with the windows open as the sun was setting. Suddenly, the sound of shouting and yelling came from outside, but I couldn't tell exactly where it was coming from. I used my phone to turn on the cameras in my backyard to record the commotion and promptly called the police. I live alone right now, but Norma and Scarlett have repeatedly made my life as stressful as possible, even during the pandemic. They seem to act up most when the weather gets cooler. My job gets busier during the holiday months, especially around Thanksgiving and Christmas, so I had been dealing with migraines from all the stress, both work-related and from the neighbor drama. I don't know if their condition is seasonal, but either way, I've been their punching bag for a while. They have harassed me through local codes, animal control complaints, verbal abuse, and even lurking around my property. It was affecting my mental and physical health. Despite installing fences and cameras, the issues continued, and they kept finding new ways to make my life harder. I suppose when your mind is creative enough to imagine that everyone is stalking you, or that your normal neighbor is somehow making illegal substances, then you're quite the creative person in general. Unfortunate for me, but that's life. About 3 months before, a new neighbor who I'll call Kendall and her husband Rick moved into the house on the other side of Norma and Scarlett. When Rick was about to mow the lawn for the first time, I was walking my dog to the park, so I introduced myself and gave him my number in case any problems arose. I also thought it would be wise to warn him about the difficult neighbor between us. Kendall texted me that night to introduce herself, and we've been friendly ever since. Norma and Scarlett have a habit of standing on their back porch and peeping into other people's yards. I guess that day one of them made a rude remark to Kendall, and things escalated from there. They started screaming louder and louder, believing that shouting makes you right. They began accusing Kendall and Rick of being part of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, stalking them, and other nonsense. So, why did I call the cops? Well, I knew that Scarlett would embarrass herself in front of law enforcement. And she sure did. She was loudly arguing and gesturing back and forth with the officers, while Norma looked like an angry Persian cat glued to the porch steps, held there by her sheer hatred. The officers were clearly annoyed and told them both to cut it out. For me, this was the first step in creating a legal paper trail and making the police see them for who they really were. The officers had been dispatched before because Norma and Scarlett had reported my dogs for barking. But in reality, they couldn't handle not peeping into my yard and kept setting my dogs off by lurking around. The whole time, I knew they were mentally unwell, so I had decided to do my absolute best not to play into their fears. To me, it seemed cruel to feed into someone's delusions, especially when they're mentally unwell. I figured it was better to be their punching bag than to mistreat them because of their condition. But one day, my patience ran out. Everyone on the street had been suffering from their antics. A neighbor had even moved out because of them after they apparently called Child Protective Services on them. Kendall and I came up with a great plan. Why not just play into Norma and Scarlett's worst fears? They already believed we were federal agents, stalkers, non-believers, and drug dealers. We couldn't possibly come up with anything worse than what they had already created in their own minds. I searched the county landowner records and found Norma's full legal name. Kendall, being quite resourceful, purchased an official membership card to the Temple of Satan under Norma's name. It arrived 3 days later. The next week, when I had some extra cash, I bought a bright rainbow pride flag from the Temple of Satan. It took about 2 weeks to arrive. On the same day the flag arrived, I noticed something strange. Random people were visiting their house, as if it was being shown for sale, but there was no sign in the yard. Homes in this town sell quickly, so it seemed like they were desperate to sell. Eager for a little revenge, even if it was short-lived, I hung the bright rainbow Temple of Satan flag on the inside of my chain-link fence in clear view of my cameras. Unfortunately for Norma and Scarlett, this flag faced directly towards their air conditioning unit, crawl space, and the fence gate on that side of the property. Anyone touring the house would see this bright neon rainbow flag in a deeply religious community. Plus, they couldn't sneakily take it down since it was in full view of my cameras. The best part was watching the reactions of everyone who toured the house. Some people laughed, while others glanced curiously at my house, probably wondering what kind of person lived there. It felt like my own little social experiment. I've even looked into other flags to hang, though I'm limited by city laws that prohibit offensive flags. We only recently got the legal right to hang pride flags because of a big lawsuit. Yes, our town is that intolerant. Norma and Scarlett had some contractors paint the bottom of their house, probably trying to hide foundation issues. Scarlett had previously accused my dogs of going into their crawl space, which was hilarious since my dogs are never outside unsupervised, and before the fence was installed, they were always on a tie-out cable. Partially because of this ridiculous claim, and because I wanted a fully fenced yard, I had a fence installed down the entire property line, which really upset them. It was placed exactly on the property line, not set back like they wanted. To top it off, I hung red Christmas lights on the fence so they'd be more visible if they lurked around at night. The bright rainbow Temple of Satan flag was lit up red every single night. I was thrilled at the idea that any new neighbor would be better than Norma and Scarlett. So, when I spotted people touring the house, I went over, introduced myself, and asked if they had any questions about the neighborhood. I made sure to tell them to get the house inspected because I'd noticed a lot of work being done in the crawlspace recently. It turns out Norma and Scarlett have had some trouble selling the house. Our street has some of the smallest homes in the county since they were originally built as military housing in the 1940s. There's nothing special about them, just the bare minimum to live in. Each house has only 2 bedrooms, so they're among the cheapest properties in the county, aside from slums. Norma and Scarlett's house, when it was first listed, was the cheapest in the county by square foot, aside from trailers or homes in disrepair. I expected it to sell within a month, because my own house had been sold in 49 days, and the market had only gotten hotter. But now, it's day 68, and they've had to relist it with a 6% price decrease. Based on what I saw from my cameras, the sale fell through once, just hours after an inspector went into the crawlspace. Tough luck for them, since most loans require an inspection anyway. With Halloween coming up, I've teamed up with the neighbors across the street to really go all out this year. Norma and Scarlett seem to despise anything they view as pagan or anti-Christian. Honestly, no one ever decorates for Halloween around here, so I'd love to finally do it, even if they move out before it happens. I'm thinking about getting some waterproof fake candles and painting a pentagram on my front lawn with white lawn paint. I have a skeleton in a black robe ready to go. Kendall has decided to buy Federal Bureau of Investigation costumes for herself and Rick, and she plans to hang a sign on her fence that says her property is monitored by the FBI. The neighbors across the street have already bought a blow-up decoration from The Nightmare Before Christmas and it's only mid-September. So far, I've put up a witch's broom, a broken axe hanging from the side of my house, and a jack-o'-lantern while I save up for more decorations. I also have an old, broken-down bicycle in my shed, and I think a skeleton riding it would be cute and unique. If my house were bigger and I didn't have dogs, I'd consider hosting a Halloween party. But honestly, I'm not much of a host, and I'm not used to drinking alcohol, let alone providing it. Maybe if I find someone throwing out an old grill, I'll use it to stage a skeleton grilling some skeleton puppies for Halloween. I hope my struggles bring someone joy. Maybe the idea of freedom just makes me happy. Story 6. My stepsister asked me to be the disc jockey at her wedding, which took place in a barn. The day before the wedding, we spent the entire day decorating the barn to her specifications. I spent nearly 3 hours that day troubleshooting problems with the speaker system and figuring out why the provided phone and playlist weren't working with the adapter. After finally getting the phone to work, I began testing the audio and determining how loud the volume needed to be to reach the entire barn. The speaker could go up to 100, with 25 being loud but manageable. However, I had to increase the volume to 87 for it to be heard throughout the barn. Before leaving for the day, I asked the bride to email me the playlist or give her phone to someone who would arrive at the barn before her so I could set up the music. On the wedding day, I arrived 30 minutes early as planned, but she hadn't left her phone with anyone or emailed me the music. I approached her aunt, who was managing things, and asked what to do. She told me to just sit in the stall and wait for the bride to arrive with the playlist. I should mention that I was wearing a Gothic-style dress, as requested by the bride. She wanted me to wear dark colors so as not to draw any attention to me or the booth. I didn't argue, so I began configuring the speakers to be ready to play the music once she handed me the phone. As soon as she entered the barn, she scolded me. "Why isn't the music playing?" "I never got the music as a compact disc or as an email playlist to bring on my own phone," I replied. "Whatever," she said, handing me her phone. "Just get the music playing and start the Here Comes the Bride song exactly at 4:30. "Not a problem," I assured her. I got the music hooked up and started playing the regular playlist for the guests, then stepped out of the stall to get some fresh air. The stall was getting stuffy, and the reverb was making my head pound after just 2 minutes. As soon as she saw me step out, she gestured to her aunt, who pointed at me. "Get back in the booth," the aunt instructed. Confused, I said, "The music is set to loop. I don't need to be in there until 4:30. It's only 4:17. "The bride wants you to stay in the booth." "Stay in the booth," she insisted. I didn't want to argue, but I was already feeling irritated about being forced to stay in a stall with the reverb rattling my head. Not wanting to make a scene, I went back into the booth. Imagine being stuck beside a loudspeaker in a movie theater for an extended period. That's how it felt after just 2 minutes. Now, imagine that for about 15 minutes while I waited for the cue to start the Here Comes the Bride song, which she had renamed on her phone. At 4:30, I started the song, and she began walking down the aisle. Once I tuned it down for them to begin the ceremony, I stepped out of the stall to watch, only to be shoved back in by the aunt and told, rather firmly, not to leave the stall. So, I sat there, unable to time when to play the Walking Away song until the aunt started flailing her arms, which I took as a signal. Once the newlyweds left the aisle, I shifted the playlist back to the waiting list and moved to step out again, only to be shoved back in by the bride this time. "Are you trying to ruin my wedding?" she demanded. "No, I just can't be expected to stay in this booth the entire time," I replied. "It's my wedding. If I tell you to stay in here, you stay in here," she insisted. "Look, I don't want to sound ungrateful on your special day, but please remember, I'm doing this for free and at great inconvenience to me. I have a term paper due by 2 a.m. at any moment. I could leave and have someone else deal with the technical chaos of this DJ booth, which smells like horse manure," I explained. The bride stormed off, crying, and tried to tell her father, my stepdad, that I was ruining her wedding. He didn't take it seriously and continued mingling with the guests. About 2 hours later, my mom entered the booth. "Aren't you going to come out and eat?" she asked. "I'm not allowed to leave. The bride said so," I replied. "What?" She flagged down my stepdad. "You haven't eaten anything, have you?" "I haven't even been able to use the bathroom," I admitted. At this point, I not only desperately needed to use the bathroom, but I was also feeling disoriented from the reverb in the booth for 2 hours, the heat, and not having eaten. "You don't look so good," my stepdad observed. Mom answered, "We're going home." "Doesn't the bride need her to run the booth until everyone leaves?" my stepdad asked. "I set the music to the dance playlist," I explained, unsteadily standing up. "It's set to loop. If someone wants to deal with this, it's their problem. I feel like I'm going to be sick." As we were leaving, the bride started scolding me for leaving the booth again, but my mom and stepdad just looked at her and said, "We're going home." During the half-hour car ride home, I passed out and woke up to my mom gently patting my face and holding some ice cream under my nose. After getting me into the house, we checked my blood sugar levels. I had dropped into a dangerously low blood sugar level, and for the next 2 days, I could barely hear anything due to the ringing in my ears. The bride continued to complain for the next 2 days about how unprofessional it was for me to leave the booth in the condition I was in. On the bright side, I submitted that term paper on time. Now, some people might be confused about the stepsister and sister-in-law terminology. The confusion comes from where I grew up, a rural town. But to be clear, she is my stepsister. I hope that clears things up. P.S. It seems some people don't understand the full background of this situation, which is my fault. I live with my mom and stepdad. It wasn't my speaker setup, they provided it. They kept handing me the wrong cables from who knows where in that barn, half of which were either shorted out or frayed, which I refused to use for safety reasons. I'm not a professional disc jockey at all. I only told them, "Get me a loudspeaker, a laptop, and the music playlist either on a compact disc or a phone, and I'll get it working." I improvised the setup, which is why it took so long. Not standing up for myself back then was my mistake, but I haven't let that happen again, especially with that entitled relative. Even my stepdad is still disgusted with her behavior that day.